Hi, this is State Representative Robert Martwick, and I'm coming to you from the state capitol in Springfield, Illinois. We're actually in my office right now, and as part of this scene of Facebook Live videos that I've been doing, that I call Behind the Scenes with State Representative Robert Martwick, I'm going to take you down the next path. So, you know, I'm trying to give you, the viewer, an insight as to what we do down here in Springfield. A lot of people see this amorphous government, state government. What do they do? What's actually going on down there? And so I'm creating little Facebook Live videos that give you segments of what goes on so you can see how the process works. You're welcome to come down and visit sometime, and you can see it for yourself firsthand. I'll be happy to give you a tour. But in the meantime, here's a look at some of the things that go on. So last week I posted a video where a constituent who was a pharmacy student came to talk about pharmacy issues. Well, that's an advocate. That's someone who does not spend his days down here. He came down for a particular issue that affected him, and he wanted to let his government know what his thoughts were on that. So that's what that was last week. But one of the things that regularly happens down here is we get visits from lobbyists. Yes, we all know that dirty word lobbyist, but lobbyists are not always what the media makes them out to be. In fact, in a citizen government where people like me have very little expertise on all of the issues that we have to vote on, we rely on lobbyists to bring us information. So lobbyists come and they give a position of information about why their bill is a good bill, or perhaps they might come visit me and say why someone else's bill is a bad bill, and I should vote yes or vote no accordingly, right? And so I wanted to give you an example of what a lobbyist visit is like. So today I was approached in the hallway. A lot of the lobbying goes on while we're running back and forth, but I didn't have time to talk to this person, and I said, can I meet you in my office later when I've got more time? And then I thought, well, this would be a great opportunity to show you what lobbyists do, and this is exactly what they do. I have no idea what she's going to tell me about. Nothing. But she's going to talk to me about a bill, and you're going to see it firsthand, and she's going to try and convince me of the merits, I believe the merits of a bill that she's supporting. So with me, I have Nora Collins-Mandeville from the Illinois Collaboration on Youth. Nora, thanks for doing this. Thanks for putting yourself out there on Facebook Live to help my constituents and my viewers see what goes on down here. So that being said, let's dive into it. So why are you here to see me?
So I'm here to talk with you about House Bill 3134.
Okay.
This is a bill that, what it does in the simplest form is right now in Illinois law, there's a provision that's called the Prompt Pay Act. It allows providers, when the state doesn't pay them on time, to get interest. Right now, the way that act is written, it does not include youth service providers. So we're not asking for any more than anyone else. We're just asking to be treated in the same way that a provider of any other services or a construction vendor would be.
Okay, so you brought that up, provider of other services, a construction vendor. So a construction vendor would be someone is contracted by the state of Illinois to do road repairs, let's just say that as an example, and Illinois doesn't pay them promptly, then they have the right to collect interest on the money that we owe them when we delay payments. And right now, with our budget impasse, we are very slow in paying our bills, right? Okay, very good. You also said other service providers. Could you give me an example of that? Were we talking like nursing homes?
So services through the Department on Aging are eligible. A lot of services that are Medicaid eligible, managed care organizations are under the act right now. Addiction treatment services are also under there. So
all of those groups would be able to collect interest on slow payments?
Correct.
Okay.
But it's very slow payments. So.
Oh yeah. Well, what's the current billing cycle right now for our viewers' edification?
Well, so what would happen, it depends on what service you provide, but what would happen is after a provider provides the services, let's say the month of July, they would submit their invoice over to the Department on Human Services. The Department of Human Services checks it and makes sure that everything's accurate, they have all the information they need. That would be about maybe a 60-day period after the services are delivered. And typically that would go over to the comptroller's office so that she could make a payment. During that, obviously that's, if we're lucky, about 90 days since you started providing those services. But the 90-day clock that applies to prompt payment actually doesn't start ticking until that, it's called a proper invoice, is certified. So it's after the Department of Human Services says everything's okay, that this is the right provision of services, it's the right amount. And you still would have to wait 90 days after that time period before you're even eligible for a 1% interest.
So it could be 6 months.
Correct.
Realistically, before
Correct.
you would be eligible for
Yes.
interest. So when the state goes longer than 6 months, you'll start collecting. What's the rate that you collect at?
It's 1% per month.
1% per month. And I know that that's the rate. It's a rate that I talk about all the time because it's you know, we should be resolving our backlog of unpaid bills so we don't have to pay that. But so who is the primary sponsor on the bill?
This is Representative Gable's bill.
Representative Gable. And do we have, are you aware of opposition to this bill?
Yes, right now, because it has a cost impact, the governor's office is opposed to it.
Okay.
So
Which makes sense, right? I mean,
Sure.
we're in a budget crisis, and this would, since we are far longer than 6 months behind on bills, this would start to accumulate additional costs to the state of Illinois by paying interest to these vendors, right? I mean, that makes sense.
yes, but I would argue that that's really an unfair approach. If, you know, in essence, if the state says we can't afford this, what it's doing is using nonprofit providers as a bankroll.
Right.
We're bankrolling the state. So, as an example, we have a member agency who has owned their property, and because of what's happening and the fact that they're not getting interest and they're not getting paid, they actually have, they're going through the process to lease out their property so that they can put a mortgage on it so that they can start, again, bankrolling in the absence of the state even providing that opportunity.
So what can you give me, you know, you generally talk about youth services. I probably know a little bit more about this than maybe the viewers do, but can you give us some example of youth services?
Sure. So there are diversion programs that keep young people out of going into the Department of Juvenile Justice. It's called Redeploy Illinois. That's one of the programs.
Redeploy is a great program. So Redeploy, as she mentioned, is kids get into trouble, and instead of them going in through the correctional, where inevitably we see too often that those are not a rehabilitative process. They are more of a penal process and refines their criminal skills, right? So before we set them onto a life path, this redeploys them into positive things that might create a more positive outcome.
Yes.
True rehabilitation.
Correct.
And services, and hopefully get them to be productive tax-paying citizens as opposed to someone who's in and out of prison taking tax dollars,
Correct.
right?
Yes.
So it's not only like the human thing to do, like if you care about children, giving them an opportunity, but it also, in the end, if you're a conservative, and I know this, redeploy services have a tremendous return on investment.
Yes.
We put $1 in, we get way more money out than we ever put in, so it's actually helping our budget situation in the long run, because it's, again, taking young people, and instead of having them turn to a life of crime and become drains on our system, they become productive tax-paying citizens and helping our system. So,
and even in the short term, when we look at the cost of the Department of Juvenile Justice, it's approximately $111,000 a year for a young person. And through the redeploy program, it's about $3,000 to $5,000 for that young person. So not only does it deliver higher, better outcomes, it's required to provide evidence-based interventions, and that's why we really do see a stronger outcome in that way.
other types of youth programs?
Sure. Homeless youth services.
Oh, that's another great one.
Yes, so that's another one that's not eligible if we don't pay.
Yeah, and homeless youth services, and again, an amazing thing people don't realize. You tend to think of homeless people as you know, the guy with the beard living under a bridge, but there are so many. How many homeless kids in Illinois do we know?
I don't know
you don't know
off the top
stat.
of my head.
It's staggering, and again, most of these kids are homeless. They bounce from friend's couch to sleeping in cars to wherever they can, and at an age where people really need guidance to get their life on track, they don't have it. And I've had visits from the program that provides homeless youth services,
Mhm.
and they take these people and they assign them a counselor
Yes.
until the age of 26 and helps them get life skills like how to get a job and how to do a resume and how to manage household finances.
Mhm.
And when you see the success stories, it's unbelievable. And again, that threshold of changing people's lives and turning them into productive citizens,
Mhm.
once again, not just the human thing to do, but the smart thing to do,
Mhm.
right? When you're in a budget crisis, you know, when you're in a hole, what's the story? Stop digging, right?
Mhm.
And I've had this discussion with the governor that, you know, not every cut saves us money, right? You want to save me $1 today, that's fine.
Mhm.
But not if it costs me $10 tomorrow.
Mhm.
In fact, if it's going to cost me $10 tomorrow, I'd rather pay $2 today and $2 tomorrow than $1 today and $10
Yes.
tomorrow. And these are stupid cuts. But that being said, so you've given a couple of examples. I know there's more. Here's my analysis of this bill. Okay.
Sure.
Number one, I get why people are opposed to it. We have no money. We're broke. We are upside down, and we are accumulating bills. And this would make that accumulation of bills more expensive. But that being the case, I also understand, and I want you to correct me if I'm wrong. I think you would tell me this, that by continuing this perpetuation of this not paying, and how long are we going now? Do you know do your providers tell you how far we are before until we get payment from the month something's per service is provided to the month you get paid? How many months in between that right now?
So right now, because the stopgap, the temporary budget Band-Aid fix, that expired on December 31st, providers can't get paid for any services that, even if there was money,
Yeah.
They can't get paid after December 31st just because there's not authorization
Oh,
to
right,
even
right.
to even
So
make
we can't
that
even
payment.
pay you even if we had the money to
Yes,
do it
for,
because we don't have the
for
budget.
the line items that I was
Yeah.
talking about there.
But where were we about before that dead stop started? What were you looking about in terms of delayment of payments?
Well, so we went 12 months, actually almost 13 months before we got payment before
13
the stop.
months.
Yes.
So you provide the service, you don't get paid for until a year and a month later.
Typically, that's not the case, but because
That's how bad it's become.
That's how bad it's become.
And as we rake up a bigger backlog of bills, that could be even worse.
And particularly where this is something that's of interest to us this year, there are proposals out there to deal with this backlog of bills.
Yeah.
So whatever proportion that looks like, the Senate had proposed doing about covering about bonding out half of the backlog of bills.
Right.
We know that because we're not eligible for prompt pay, this interest payment, that there's a disincentive to pay us.
Right.
So there's because we aren't eligible for interest, there's even a larger concern about not being eligible.
And that makes a lot of sense to me, and that really, that last thing that you said, the idea that because you're not eligible for prompt pay, meaning they don't have to pay you interest, then you definitely get pushed to the back of the line. Very, very important services, but they say, we don't ever have to pay them any more money, just keep pushing them to the back, and let's get the ones that we do have to pay interest, get them off the books, right? So normally I would not be supportive of anything that puts additional pressures on the budget, but you said a couple of things that really speak to me. Number one, these are critical services, and they are smart things that we should be spending money on because they're not just spending money, they're saving us money by providing them, and they're allowing us to do what we should be doing as a government, which is care for those most in need. So there's no reason not to be funding these programs, and yet because of this budget impasse, we're stopping funding on everything. The idea that I would not vote to extend interest if it wasn't already being offered to so many other vendors.
Sure.
And when you think about people in the construction industry, the reason that we've done that is because that we realize by delaying the payment of bills, we're creating an undue hardship that is just not fair. There's no reason that you shouldn't be included in that act. And so I will be happy to support it. And if you like, you can add me as a co-sponsor.
Great, that would be wonderful.
All right. So now there you saw. Now that one worked out pretty easy. I had no idea. I could have been opposed to that bill. I had no idea. But as it turns out, it was something that really spoke to me. But that's what lobbying is about. People come and they provide you information. It's not always on something like this, although this is not an easy issue. This is about adding to our debt at a time when our debt is monstrous. But you have to weigh the balances. And right now, the more we push programs like this to the back of the line, the more likely they are to fold because they won't be able to continue to afford to provide the service, which will cost us more in the long run than actually paying them now. And that's why I support this, because I think it's the right thing to do from a moral standpoint and from a financial standpoint. Even though it costs us money today, it'll save us money in the long run. And I care about that more than anything else. So I'll be supporting this bill, but now you get a chance to see what lobbyists do. I said everyone has a different interest, but that's generally it. We'll try and broadcast more of them. Reach out to me on Facebook if you have comments, or reach out to me. You can email me. You can connect to me at my district office on the Northwest Side. As always, thank you for watching, and thank you for agreeing to do this. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
I'm sure the viewers do too. Thank you so much for coming.